All right, see people coming in from Toronto.
Blood transfusion.
You didn't feel that?
I love
That was not your feeling?
Well,
Paul is back in America. Goodness.
What'd you say, Ashahaya?
Paul is back in
Paul is
America.
back in America, exactly.
America, you say.
America.
I
America.
don't remember which. Why isn't this moving? Here we go.
Can we study today to honor the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington?
Sure. Which March on Washington?
With Martin Luther King.
Yes,
I was
absolutely.
there. I was
Absolutely.
there.
Really? At the march?
And you were at the march. Nikki was at the march. Okay, now we're beginning. That's an excellent suggestion, Amy. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, mute, unmute, whatever you want. This is the bracha. Join in. It's on the screen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
Asher kitshanu tzivanu asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen, amen.
Amen.
So may this cacophony of voices coming from all over, maybe the world, reveal truth and light of divine Torah in this session. So today, wow, what a parsha, right? Kititze is like a stunning parsha, stunning array of laws, some really kind of sublime and humane and some inscrutable and cruel. But today we're going to, and I'll just give you a few examples, like stoning the wayward child, right? That's not such a nice one. Thank God the rabbis, Ashafan is making like, maybe it is nice. The rabbis sort of, interpreted it out of existence, thank God. So it's, remember that the Torah is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. And then there are things like what to do with a captive woman, or building a guardrail on your roof so people don't fall off, right? You don't want anyone to fall off your roof. Or what do you do with finding a lost object? Like you're walking down the street and you see your neighbor's ox, for instance, right? Just go around the block in New York City, you'll see your neighbor's ox. So what do you do with your neighbor's ox? So those are some wild examples, and they're not, on the face of it, obviously connected. But if we dig in, maybe they are connected in different ways. But today I want to sort of really take a deep dive into one. And the mitzvah is called Shiluach HaKen. And what it is when you find a nest and you find a mother bird over her eggs or over her young, you send away the bird before taking the eggs or the babies. Okay, so is that a good mitzvah? Is that a bad mitzvah? Is that compassionate? Is that cruel? So we're going to dig into that and see what that's all about on different levels. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Great. The chat is open. I'll be looking at it once in a while. So, but it's, it's your conversation to have, should you want to. I call this hovering over the cosmic nest. I will begin reading, and then I will ask Asher Chaim and maybe other friends who would like to help me read as we go forward. Okay, so here we are, Deuteronomy 22, 6 and 7. Ki kareh ken sipor lefanecha baderech v'chol eitz. Okay, remember that we can hear, people on Zoom hear everything. Jeffrey, people on Zoom hear all conversations. Oh, it's that. Can you help us?
I'm whispering, they can't hear me. But anyway, we're sitting down.
Ki kared ken sipor lefanecha baderech v'chol eitz o al haaretz efrochim o veitzim v'ha'em rovetzet al ha'efrochim o al ha'bitzim lo tikach ha'em al ha'banim. Okay, if along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with your young. Instead, what shall you do? Shaleach tishalach et ha'em ve'et habanim tikach lach l'ma'an yitav lach. L'ma'an yitav lach v'ha'arachta yamim. Okay, so what you shall do, instead of taking them both at once, is let the mother go. Take only the young in order that you may fare well and have a long life. So this is fascinating, so many levels. We're going to dig into this in a minute. But I just want to take a quick survey, and I want you to put things in the chat. Just phrases. Is this a good mitzvah or a bad mitzvah? What do you think? Quick.
Good mitzvah.
Good mitzvah?
Yeah.
Okay, quick. Why, Rob?
I think the reward, very few places in the Torah it says reward, but it's when you say you honor your mother and your father, the reward will be long life.
Correct.
Which is the same reward as...
So you think it's a good mitzvah? Well, but what I'm asking you is really not to point to the Torah and say, what does the Torah think of this mitzvah, but to assess the mitzvah. Is it a good mitzvah?
It's on the same level as honoring your parents.
It's honoring, okay, all right, so you're answering from inside the Torah. It's the same level as this, it must be a good mitzvah. Okay, quick, I'm doing a lightning round and I'm gonna read the chat.
Neither one.
Neither one. It's neither good nor bad. It is whatever, you don't understand.
Well, it's got good aspects, it's got terrible aspects.
Okay, all right, good. So we're gonna get into both. Yeah,
We need to eat, so do it compassionately.
say it again.
We need to eat.
We need to eat compassionately. What's
You eat
compassionate about?
compassionately.
What's compassionate about this?
The mom is not going to suffer.
Really? You're gonna send her away from her children? She's
At
not
least
gonna
she's not
suffer?
going to
Really?
see it.
At least she's not gonna see it. At least she's not gonna see it.
Give
Okay,
her another
Rachel.
chance.
I am doing some organizing, social organizing with the Audubon Society. And I said, oh, look, I can send it to them. And I said to myself, oh my God, any member of the Audubon Society would be horrified.
Any member of the Audubon Society, horrified. This is a bad law. We don't like this whole book because of this mitzvah. We're throwing it out. Don't tell them, Rachel.
Well, I will
Don't
not
tell
tell
them.
them. They cannot find
The
this.
eggs, should we
Okay.
leave?
Yeah,
Last comment. I'm gonna see if there's
Last
anything in the
comment,
chat.
okay. I think that it should have been split in two. After all, we eat eggs from chickens all the time. That's how we live. However, once that fledgling has been, what's not even fledgling, once the little bird has been born, then it's going to be very hard for them for the bird to get new eggs, it's a whole other thing.
fledglings.
It's a whole other thing.
Okay, got it. So
you
there's two
don't
things.
eat
If it's
fledglings. They're
just
too
eggs,
teeny.
it's okay, send them other way, but if it's fledglings, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Okay, all right, so let me just see if there is anything in here. The chat, Ivy Kaufman, okay, March for Peace and Justice in DC, 60th anniversary, yes. Okay, we send that, all right. I would say leave one or more eggs. Okay, leave one or more eggs and let more chicks be born, I think
Yeah,
Iva's
that's
saying.
it.
Mothers survive, but next generation of these chicks bite the dust. Is this the choice parsha? I don't understand that comment, but it's okay, we'll go on. Okay, all right, a few things about the language here. First of all, I noticed this thing, I actually asked Asher Chaim about it, and he didn't really know, but it says, B'sifrei Teiman, Ken b'kuf gedolah. So in the Yemenite scrolls of the Torah, the word nest is written with a big kuf, right, in the scroll. So what's going on there? That's so interesting. So at least in my mind, in a way, I think in the letter, they're building a nest. Why a big kuf? So you think about a kuf, like this. So that was my association, so I left it in there. So that's number one. Number two, there's a really interesting word here, which is, but it turns out it's not so interesting, but then it turns out it is very interesting. And I'll explain. So here's the word efrochim, so, little fledglings, little birds. And my mind went immediately to the word mirachefet, where God hovers in the beginning of creation. And it turns out that mirachefet is a special word for hovering over birds, right? But, and I wrote to both Jeremy and Asher Chaim about this yesterday, mirachefet has the same letters as chicklets, efrochim, but in a different order. So at least on paper, they're not related. But my mind went there, and I think you'll see why in a few minutes. Okay, so then here's something else that's interesting. It says, Lo tikach ha'em al habanim. Don't take the mother on the children, right? There's something about that relationship which seems to me to be sacred or important. And again, I think that will emerge as we go on. And lastly, what Robert said is amazing. The only 2 mitzvahs in the whole Torah for which you're guaranteed a long life are honor your mother and father and this one. Right, so what is it about long life and these 2 mitzvot? So I'm gonna plant the question, we'll come back to it. So just like, let it percolate in like the collective mind here, right, the hive mind. Shabbat shalom.
Was they
You know, I'm gonna ask everybody to raise their hands because I'm navigating the screen and the room, and I want it to be one group. No, Nikki, you don't have to apologize, I'm just giving you a sense. Now say what you have to say, and then I'm gonna.
Did they have domesticated chickens in those days, or were they dependent upon finding them on the road?
Great question, no idea. If anyone knows, put it in the chat, no idea.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Cultivated animals went back way before that.
So there's no need to do this.
Well, it depends who, do they have chickens, do they live in a, I don't know. Let's go on, who knows if they need to do this or not? Unless you want to say something about that.
No, we'll more later.
Okay, more later. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so here's the verb with the verse with mirachefet. So bear with me for a few minutes to see sort of the unfolding of this really interesting verb and, you know, how it may or may not connect to our primary text in our parsha. V'ha'aretz hayta tohu v'avohu v'choshech al pnei tehom v'ruach Elohim mirachefet al pnei hamayim. So the earth being, so many of us are familiar with this verse. The earth being is the second verse in the whole Torah. The earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind. Sorry, that's just a footnote here. And a wind, or some say spirit of God sweeping over the waters, over the water. So what is God doing here with this mirachefet, right? So here's another mirachefet, or here's another in the next. Source 3, another use of this verb, but a slightly different form of it. It says here, and this is at the end of the book of Deuteronomy in Moshe's poetry, right? Describing God as, in verse 11, Kenesher Yair Kino Agozalav Yirachef. Yifros knafav yikachehu yisaehu al evrato, like an eagle who rouses its nestlings, gliding down to its young. I'm not sure about this translation of yirachef, but again, hovering over its chicks, right? So did God spread wings and take them, bear them along on pinions. So this is God taking Bnei Israel out of Egypt, right? Spreading wings and taking them, bearing them on pinions. No idea what pinions are, but sounds liberatory. Okay, so then finally, what does mirachef mean? And here's the BDB, Biblical Dictionary, and it says, move gently, cherish, brood, right? Brood as in a bird broods. And also brooding, fertilizing, hovering over young. So this makes me think that there's something about God as, you know, there's something powerful here about God and the image of God as a mother bird over a nest of its young, and we'll see that will come up a little bit later. This association between this verse, right, from our Parsha, about sending away the mother bird and God as a mother bird. Okay, so my associative mind went there, and again, just to tell you my process, I looked at the word Ephrochim, I wrote to my friends Jeremy and Asher Chaim, my Hebrew experts. They said no connection, and yet my mind kind of stayed with God and Merachefet, and it sort of emerged that God as a mother hovering over its young, that there's something in the Torah about that, and we'll have some interpretation that kind of makes that connection. Okay, Paul, quick question? Comment?
Quick comment, yeah. Birds, the mother bird in all species imprints themselves onto the fledglings. This generally happens in...
What do you mean by imprint?
Well, when birds are born, they don't know what they are. They visually learn from the mother what species they are, and that's a lifetime gain. For the rest of their life, they know that because the mother bird imprints herself onto the fledglings, and it happens generally in the first day or two. And I think, so we have to separate, I think one has to consider the fledglings versus the beitzim, the eggs, being very different things. And if we think about ourselves, we did not know, we did not recognize who we were until God basically imprints God's self on us. So I think there's something to be...
God imprints God's self on us by taking us out of Egypt so that we literally know God, right? That's the act of imprintment.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Okay,
Well,
I'm still curious about this process of imprinting and what that means, but let's go forward. Did you want to say anything else, Paul?
No, not only bringing us out of Egypt, but giving us Torah.
Correct. First step, bringing us out of Egypt. Second step, Torah is the big imprint.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, Asher Chaim and then Richard.
Yeah, just to clarify, when I wrote back that Fei Resh Het and Resh Het Fei aren't the same Shoresh, I did say that it is the same three letters. And I did find my copy of Horowitz, How the Hebrew Language Grew. Whenever you have at least two letters, there is a correlation and at least a poetic connection, if not more. It is
Beautiful.
to do something in your brain that says there's a connection to be made.
Great. Okay, so there, yes, it does certainly feel like something linguistics going on there, even though the letters are not in the same order. And yes, there's a poetic connection. And I was kind of following my associative mind because it feels often like when I do, I actually find something in the ancient rabbis that has gone to the same place that I'm going. And that's incredibly gratifying. It's amazing, right? It's like hooking into the rabbinic mind through the associative process. So something to think about. Richard, you want to say something?
Some years back there was a hawk who set up a nest on a broad windowsill at an NYU office building, and they showed the camera on it constantly, 24/7, so you could watch it online.
Wow!
What was happening? It was fascinating. But after the eggs were born, there were these birds that weren't yet fledgling. That is, they couldn't fly yet. So the mother hawk would go out and gather food, bring back a mouse, because they ate meat. And these were tiny little creatures. Without the mother there, they would die. So I think the distinction between eggs and the fledglings is critical in trying to evaluate the content of that message. But it was a fascinating experience to tune in there. And then when they took off, it made the New York Times. I mean, it was a big deal when they flew down to the Washington Square Park and started looking for food.
That's so beautiful.
It was incredible, just incredible.
Wow. All right, we are going on. Okay, here we go. Rachel, can you wait or okay? Yeah, you sure? Okay, so let's go. All right, so we did this, we did that. Okay. So I already said about the same reward as honoring one's father and mother, and that's bolded in sources 5 and 6 in Exodus and Deuteronomy. Okay, so now we're going to look into some meanings of this mitzvah from our ancestors, beginning with Abraham Isaac Cook. Okay, so Abraham Yitzchak Abraham Cook, Harav Yitzchak Abraham Cook says, we must take, this is about this mitzvah, we must take to heart that we are not involved with a random object that moves about like an automaton. but with a living, feeling creature. We must become attuned to its senses, even to its emotions, to the feeling it has for the life of its family members, and to its compassion for its own offspring. That's so beautiful and so connected to what Richard was just saying. Like, how do you become attuned? You watch, you listen, you learn, right? How do you connect to living creatures? Okay, now, Nachmanides, Ramban. Okay, so this is Ramban's interpretation of this mitzvah, which is also related to the environment, but a little bit different.
Wow.
Scripture will not permit a destructive act that will cause the extinction of a species, even though it has permitted the ritual slaughtering of that species. And he who kills mother and children in one day, or takes them while they are free to fly away, is considered as if he destroys the species. So it's too much exploitation to take a mother and its children at the same moment. And it's related to don't drink
Don't boil the
boil
cat.
the cat.
Thank you. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, right? Too much exploitation, right, of a mother. There's something that feels cruel about that, right? And Ramban is connecting that to the actual destruction of the species. And it's true that disregard does lead to the extinction of a species, right? Okay, I'm gonna go on. Hold on. I'm going to do a bunch, and then I'm going to ask for people who haven't spoken yet, and then I'll go back to the people who have spoken. Okay, so then the Rambam, Maimonides, fascinating. I think very radical piece. Asher Chaim, do you have the energy to read? Okay, we're in 9. You can decide if you want to read all the Hebrew or some of the Hebrew, or where you want to read the Hebrew and read all the English.
וכן אסר לשחוט אותו ואת בנו ביום אחד. Similarly, it is prohibited to sacrifice it and its offspring on the same day. להישמר ולהרחיק לשחוט משניהם הבן לעיני האב, כי צער בעלי חיים בזה גדול מאוד. This is because killing the two together in such a manner that the young is slain in the sight of the mother is pain inflicted on animals, and it's very great. There is no difference in this case between the pain of human and the pain of other living beings, since the love and tenderness of the mother for her young is not produced by reason, but by imagination. And this faculty exists not only in humans, but in most living beings.
Okay, listen to the Rambam for a second. No difference between the pain of human beings and the pain of other living beings. And this imagination, I think, is like a word that is not only about imagination, but feeling as well, right? It's like more the intuitive part of, it's an intuitive faculty as opposed to a logical faculty.
This law applies only to ox and lamb because of the domestic animals used as food. These alone are permitted to us, and in these cases the mother recognizes her young. וזה הטעם גם כן בשילוח הקן, כי הביצים אשר שכבה האם עליהם והאפרוחים הצריכים לאימם, על הרוב אינם ראויים לאכילה. Same applies to this sending away the mother bird. The eggs over which the bird sits, the young that still need their mother, are generally unfit for food. And when the mother is sent away, she doesn't see the taking of her young and does not feel any pain. In most cases, however, the commandment will cause humans to leave the whole nest untouched, because the young or the eggs, which he's allowed to take, are, as a rule, unfit for food. Keep going?
Yes.
ואם אלו השערים הנפשיים חסר התורה עליהם בבהמות ובעופות, כל שכן בבני אדם כולם. If Torah provides that such grief should not be caused to cattle or birds, how much more careful must we be that we should not cause grief to our fellowmen? When in the Talmud those are blamed who use in their prayer the phrase, "Your mercy extends to young birds," it's the expression of the one of the two opinions mentioned by us. namely that the precepts of the law have no other reason but divine will. We follow the other opinion.
In other words, these are not just simply chok. These are not simply commandments without any reason. There's actually reason here. That's what Rambam sees. And I think it's pretty radical when he says there's no difference in this case between the pain of human beings and the pain of other living beings. Yes, Ashai.
If I may add another gloss, a wonderful Pardes Parsha podcast this week, that the person who's davening, leading "Your mercy extends to young birds," is told to be quiet and pushed away because it's assuming that it's God's compassion, as if God were compassionate, which Rambam doesn't like either. But really, the key is not God's compassion, but awakening our compassion, teaching us to be compassionate. So the Shiluach HaKen, and this is a great, squaring the circle of Rambam, that we may not be able to know God to say what God is, only what God isn't. But at the same time, this is how we train ourselves in compassion towards animals and by extension, compassionate towards fellow humans.
So, and it seems to balance, the mitzvah seems to balance our compassion with our need to survive, right? We need to eat, and yet just don't grab, eggs or fledglings with a mother in sight. So don't just give way to that kind of baser instinct. Okay. So now the connection between God as a mother bird and Shiluach HaKen. So let's see what happens here. So I'm going to read this in English because this Aramaic I really don't know. It's a different kind of Aramaic, the 14th century sort of interpretation of the Zohar itself. Okay, so it says, there is an angel appointed over the birds. And when Israel performs this commandment, and the mother departs weeping and her children crying, the angel agonizes, he agonizes for his birds. Yeah, the angel agonizes for his birds and asks God, does it not say that God's compassion is on all of his works? So in other words, this angel is complaining about this mitzvah. Why are we separating the mother from its children? It's cruel. Why did you decree on that bird to be exiled from her nest, right? And from a certain perspective, it is. You might say, yes, it trains us from not just like grabbing and exploiting, animals and living creatures, and yet it's really not good enough. And the angel's feeling that pain. And what does the Holy One do? God gathers all of God's other angels and says to them, you see this angel here? This angel is concerned for the welfare of a bird as complaining of its suffering to me, right? Is there none amongst you who will seek merit on my children Israel? And for the Shekhinah, right? God's presence, feminine presence on this earth, which is in exile and whose nest in Jerusalem has been destroyed, and whose children are in exile under the hand of harsh masters. Is there no one who seeks compassion for them and will attribute merit to them? Then the Holy One issues a command and says, for my sake I shall act, and I shall act for my sake. And compassion is therefore aroused upon the Shekhinah and the children in exile. So what's going on here, right? This is a very strange text. There's an angel who doesn't like, a bird angel, who doesn't like this commandment because the mother is sent away and is in exile from her children. And hearing that, God says to all the other angels, what? Right, here's this angel with compassion on this mother. And what about me? Right, do you have compassion for me who's in exile from my own children? Right, God is a mother bird, and I've been exiled from my nest in Jerusalem, right, with my children in it. Right, so, and then God has compassion for God's own self. For my sake I shall act, and I shall act for my sake. And therefore, compassion is aroused. That's really interesting. In who? Right? Upon the Shekhinah and the children in exile. So somehow this mitzvah ends up arousing compassion, right, in the Shekhinah. Even though it's a mitzvah that's really, according to this text, is really not, right, there's something cruel about it. So, okay, now I'm gonna stop and see what people wanna say. See if there are any hands in the room or hands on Zoom. Any hands, anyone who has not spoken yet? Yes, Wendy.
What I wanted to say is, if you think about it, if you destroy the mother bird,
yeah,
you also destroy the eggs and the young, the fledglings as well, because the eggs can't survive and the young baby birds can't survive either. So by destroying the mother,
but the people who's shooing the mother away just wants to take the eggs.
Right. So in a way, it's compassionate, and in that the mother survives. The mother will come back to the same nest again and lay more eggs. And like where I live, outside my kitchen window, I have a tree and there's a nest, and every year the same bird comes back and lays eggs, and
nice.
I watch it, watch this whole process take place. And so the mother not only has a connection to the babies themselves and the eggs, but the mother also has a connection to the nest, to the place.
Interesting.
To the place.
So there's something about this mitzvah you're saying that's generative. Like even though a person will consume the eggs or maybe even the fledglings, I guess.
Yes.
The mother can come back and lay more eggs. Okay, good. All right. So Gloria Askin online. Is this Jamie Askin's mother? Welcome. Shabbat shalom. Great to meet you. We don't hear you yet because you're not unmuted yet.
Yep, I am muted. Thank you. It's great to meet you. Yes. And that is sort of what I was thinking. This is about preserving the future, but not, how do I put this? We need to survive. How do we need to survive? Is this a necessity for our beings? But we need to keep our eye on the future, because that's what we really are doing here. Is providing for the future, the continuance. And
so I eat and the mother gets to lay more eggs, basically. That's how this works. Thank you. Okay, Helio.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Helio.
Thank you very much. Your last speech of yesterday was very good. I love it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad you liked it.
And I want to ask, all the time you are said that Shekhinah is on the exile, okay?
Why? Where?
And you have a famous tale of Nachman of Bratslav, the lost princess. All the time we are said that Shekhinah is on exile.
Yeah.
It's possible to Shekhinah is not to be in an exile. I think if Shekhinah is not in exile, we don't know Shekhinah. It's impossible to know Shekhinah if he's not in exile.
It's impossible to know Shekhinah if Shekhinah is not in exile.
I think so.
Why?
Because if Shekhinah is so near God, or Shekhinah is God, that we couldn't know her or him. I don't know.
Shekhinah is an aspect of God, and the imminent aspect of God. I don't think I'm totally understanding what you're saying. Why? I understand maybe what you're saying is if God is not in exile, then we don't have that yearning for God. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, I mean, that's a big question. Like, can we know Shekhinah? Can we know God? And how can we know God? And I think that you're right, that some of the knowing God happens through the very yearning for God. And I think that's beautiful. Thank you, Helio.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
so I'm gonna go to Jeffrey and then Rhoda. And then a few hands here. Yeah.
If you look at when this was written, and if you look at the world now,
Yeah.
boy, it's really fascinating to think about. The Rambam talked about extinction of species, and so where are we today? We're in a world today where we don't need to eat animals at all today. So first of all, the idea that people are surprised that animals suffer is surprising. I mean, if you step on a dog's tail, so a cow has feelings, and chickens have feelings, and fish have. There are recent studies on fish having feelings.
Yeah, but there's a different kind of pain between stepping on a dog's tail and separating that dog from their puppies. That's a different kind of pain.
And both should be self-evident. We shouldn't even have to wonder. Of course, it's the same. So that's one thing. Second, what we know now is that we're literally extinguishing species of the whole world via all of the environmental practices that we're doing. And we know that that animal farming is the single largest source of greenhouse gases, which has the potential of destroying the whole earth and extinguishing everything. So if we were to take this seriously, we would all just realize that we should move to a plant-based world.
What's when you say this seriously? What's the this?
So
compassion. What's
the
this?
food, the way that we use animals for food, which is what this is about. Now, talk about the cruelty of how we raise animals. I mean, there's so many things in there.
There's so many implications.
There's so many implications that all point to something which we think most people think is almost a joke. Like the idea that we would stop eating meat. Like, come on. That's like. Well, I would say the same thing about slavery. Like, why do we think that it would be okay to eat meat, given all these implications and the fact that we're literally destroying the world because of our appetite for meat, is any worse than slavery, which we have somehow decided is not acceptable. But of course, we can enslave animals, be cruel to them, extinguish them, and extinguish the whole world because of our thirst for hamburgers.
Okay, so let me say something. So I think in every generation, we have new justice revelations, right? So these are emerging revelations for us, especially as we look at the consequences of what we've done to this planet. But I will also say that it's amazing, just to amplify what you said, that these realizations are already in our ancient texts, in the Torah, in the Rambam, in the Ramban, and they're radical. And are we willing to shift our lives as we see the pain and suffering in animals and in ourselves, right? The fires, the floods, the proportions are biblical. Can we really take this in?
Can I just add one more sentence? One more sentence. Zalman, he talked about this idea of eco-kashrut. He thought it was a farce that you're kosher by eating your Shabbat meal on styrofoam plates and then throwing the styrofoam away, given what styrofoam did to the environment. So that kind of consciousness,
what about our use of plastic?
Same thing. So
what about our use of plastic?
The exact same thing.
Okay. This is going to have implications for our next staff meeting, I'm just telling you. Okay.
Well, today's lunch is all vegan, just as in honor of this discussion.
Okay, real plates? I hope so. Rhoda Sage, online.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. And
Rhoda.
everything. Yes, hi.
Great to see you. Wow.
Well, my elevator's still broken, and that's why I'm not in synagogue.
We miss you.
Everything that Jeffrey said is part of everything that is part of my passion, and everything you were just saying. Adding to that, I just heard about the Colorado River is drying and all the water that goes to animals because of raising animals for food. When I heard the Rambam, I never knew that, say the suffering of every human creature for animals I just want to, I just want to spread that gospel to everyone who doesn't know Torah. I just, by chance, yesterday on WNYC and Brian Lara's show, he happened to have Peter Singer as a guest. And that goes back to his book, Animal Liberation in 1975. And many of us were very involved even back then. He's
Yeah,
written a new
Peter's
book called
kind of a
Animal
prophet.
Liberation Now.
Yeah. So,
And I just want to say for years when I was...
Oh, wait, hold on, let's what?
Wendy answered all my questions.
Wait, oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Rhoda, I just want to make sure, did you finish?
Only that I've known about this connection between all of this and many of us for many, many years. And I feel more than gratified and happy and that Rambam said this so many years ago.
It is gratifying, and what I wanted to say to Rachel Maklev, which you could take this text from the Rambam to the Audubon Society.
Absolutely.
Keep the Torah secret.
Thank you.
And then just take, right?
Okay, well, it's superseded.
Yeah, just cover up, do a cut and paste.
If discovered, I'll tell them it was superseded by what I showed you. Yes.
Rob.
To Jeff's point, I was listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
And this gentleman was speking to a high school, and he asked if you saw your dog drowning or a person drowning, who would you save?
Right.
The dog.
Class raised their hand that they would save the dog.
Their dog as opposed to a person.
Their dog as opposed to a person. So you talk about history and where we've come with animals and stuff where I can't say that applies to the whole population.
We like our pets, but we don't like the cows on the farm.
Bingo. No, we don't like people.
No, but, and we also don't like the cows on the farm.
Right, we choose our dog over human beings.
Okay. All right. All right. A couple of quick comments, and I want to do a few more texts. Okay, Nikki.
Yes, this is in relation to having the bird species survive. And there was a case of an Eskimo woman or Inuit woman who was stranded somewhere, and she ate her children because she said, I can have more children, and they can't survive without me. So
got it. Gotcha. Okay. Judy and Wendy, and I'm going back to the text. Judy, I think you can unmute yourself.
So I think this is an example of the paradigm. There's a principle involved that when we get specific instructions from Torah, that's a paradigm for the larger case. So if it's specific to the bird, that this is a paradigm for how we should be treating humans.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how Ramban and Rambam understand it as the specific that leads us to bigger principles. Thank you. Okay, Wendy, very quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say that for the Rambam, for Maimonides, this is a very unusual saying, because Maimonides tends to be much more didactic and be much less emotional in all of his teachings. So for him to be emotional in a teaching is very,
that's interesting.
If you look at all of his work, he's very didactic. He's not emotional. And for him to be emotional in this instance is unique to all his writing.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now, so I wanted to bring a story into this, and the story is really interesting because it connects honor thy father and thy mother, and this mitzvah of shooing the mother bird away. As you recall, they both have the same reward, and none of the other 10 commandments had a reward. So that's really fascinating, right? These are the only two mitzvot in the entire Torah that have this reward of lengthening one's days. So what happens in the Gemara? Okay, so Rav Yosef said. So this is basically about Acher. Oh, What happened?
Just stop and share.
Stop share. Thank you for pointing that out. That was a failed share, an aborted share. Okay. That works?
Yep.
Okay. So, Elisha ben Abuya. Who is Elisha ben Abuya? He was called Acher. Why? Because he became an apostate, right? He became disillusioned with the Torah and with Judaism. He's one of the 4 sages that went into the Pardes, and when he came out, he was an apostate. Right? What's the Pardes? It was kind of a mystical orchard, and Rabbi Akiva was the only one who came in peace and left in peace. Right? So for the others, there were disasters. So this text is interpreting why Acher became an apostate, and why, here, it says, what caused Acher to sin? So, hold on 1 second. There are those who said he saw a case like this, where a son went up to the roof on his father's command, dispatched the mother's bird, and then died. So this child, who's listening to his father and fulfilling the mitzvah of Shilul Haken, of shooing away the mother bird, fell and died, right? And what's interesting is that in a sense, this caused Elisha ben Abuya to fall, right? To fall away from Torah, fall away from God. So what about this? Why would this be so distressing to Elisha ben Abuya, that he would become the person who's called Acher, the other? So one can imagine that if you devote your life to Torah, but you don't see it working in the world, and you see such an extreme example of it not working in the world, you become profoundly disappointed and alienated and say, I can't live with this anymore. And I was just talking to my friend and Chavrita, Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld, and Soloveitchik, the great 20th century modern Orthodox rabbi, does a comparison of Elisha ben Abuya and Akiva. That Akiva, came up as a shepherd and as a modest shepherd, and basically came from nothing, and was able to reinvent himself again and again. But Elisha ben Abuya started off as this great scholar, right? And then couldn't live with the imperfection of the world, and I guess the imperfection of Torah as well. Sharon, did you want to add anything on that? I see something from you in the chat. Let's see. Actually, Adin Steinshoff. Oh, sorry. Adin Steinshoff. A different great 20th century Orthodox rabbi and thinker. Thank you. Okay.
I don't understand this.
You don't understand what?
The whole.
So Nikki, what's going on here is that Acher, or Elisha ben Abuya, witnesses a boy fulfilling 2 commandments for which you're supposed to have as a reward the lengthening of days. He listened to his father by obeying him and going up to the roof and shooing away the mother bird before he took the eggs. And he fell from that roof and died. So it's a complete contradiction to the Torah. And that made Elisha ben Abuya lose faith. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes, Richard.
His father disobeyed the Torah.
How?
By not putting a fence around the roof.
That's right.
Good one!
That's right.
Whoa!
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's not the kid, it's the dad who should be responsible for what happened.
Ooh.
That changes the entire meaning of this set of phrases.
Yeah. Wow. So then Elisha ben
Didn't mean to throw a
Abuya
wrench in
became
the
an
network here, but I did.
apostate, but instead, according to Richard's reading, we should have lost faith in humanity instead of in Torah and God.
Or in father, right?
or in that particular parent.
Right.
Okay. So David Siegman says, why was Elisha able to reimagine the Torah as a mythology full of aspirations and dreams for humanity, rather than reject the entire project? That's a beautiful question. There was no social support system for such a reform. Only centuries later have we been able to offer our Elisha an alternative. Our Elishas, that's a beautiful comment. So now we want to sort of comfort with Elisha with a different understanding of Torah, which is sort of, as symbol and myth and moral guidance, as opposed to being taken literally. And if we do that, then what does the reward of long life mean, David Siegman or others? What is the lengthening, literally the lengthening of days or the lengthening of life mean here? Let's go back at David Siegman's invitation, so to speak. The harach dayamin, your day. It's not literally long life. I'll be very clear about that. Lengthening days, right? Literally lengthening days. And then let's go to the parents. So it says here, again, Laman yarichun yamecha. Again, lengthening of days. And this takes me back to a comment Asher Chaim had made when we studied Honor Thy Father and Mother, and it could be that Asher Chaim wants to make it right now. Asher Chaim, take it away.
Actually, I was going to make a different point, but I remember Rabbi David Levine, son of Lee Levine, teaching that the lengthening of your days is honoring your parents gives you history. It lengthens your days backwards, not necessarily forwards. What I was going to say about Elisha ben Abuya is that there's a difference between actuarial truths and truths applied to each and every individual. And this may be more actuarial. As a society, every individual will have length of years and fulfillment living in a world of compassion for animals and honoring parents, even if it doesn't apply in every single case to every single individual. Perhaps the story of Elisha ben Abuya is, I wish I could use the word synecdoche more often, a sort of a single example of a larger phenomenon of living under Roman occupation and seeing so much suffering going on around him. It's just the world is not fair, and he couldn't cope with that.
Yeah, he couldn't live with that suffering.
What are the additional lines here?
We're not doing those.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
They're very strange.
Very strange. I'm not going to get into those right now just because of the time. And we have a bar mitzvah, a bee mitzvah next door. I think that there's something about connection to parents, but also there's something about the maternal relationship here and honoring that, right? The mother and its young. And I don't have it fully articulated in my own mind, but I think compassion, parents, generativity, generations, being attuned to that perhaps give us a sense of lengthened days, or, we talk about the quality of time and consciousness, more of a sense of deep time, right? Deep time, so that this kind of mindfulness of other creatures, right, and that compassion perhaps gives us, an enlarged consciousness. I know I'm speaking in abstract terms. I'm just sort of trying to articulate something that's bubbling up. But I think all these texts come together, like the fledglings, the Efroch, the Mirat Chesed, like God is the hovering mother, and that compassion is fascinating. And what the Shekhinah experiences, right? That pain of being exiled and distant from her children, and sort of the symbol of the mother bird sort of coming alive in divine compassion, right? And how is that compassion aroused in us? And how is that compassion aroused in God at this moment in Elul, right? Which is the month of belonging to God as one belongs to their lover, and God belonging to us as a lover as well, right? Anila dodi v'dodi, right? So what's getting in the way of that compassion? And that also takes us to Jeffrey's comment, how can we reconnect with what practices? Can we reconnect to the planet and to the reality and the suffering of animals, right? Okay, so I end with Tehillim, a psalm, because we again have an image of a nest and young and Ephrocheha, right, fledglings. So it says here, Lamanatseach al Hagitit Livnei Korach Mizmor. Right, for the leader on the Gitit of the Korahites, a psalm. That's all by way of introduction. Ma yididot mishkanotecha Adonai Tzvaot. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. Nichsefa. I long, I yearn. Hilio was talking about yearning, right, before. Nichsefa, v'gam chalta nafshi, v'chatzrot Adonai, libi u'bisari. I long, I yearn for the courts of the Lord. My body and soul shout for joy to the living God. You run anew, El Chai. Okay, here's the bird imagery. Gam sipur matzah bayit udror ken la asher shata efrocheha et mizbechotecha Adonai tzvaot malki ve'elohai. Wow, dense Hebrew. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself in which to set her young. Near your altar, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. And then finally, bringing us to this morning's services, Ashrei Yoshvei Ve'techa Odil Yehalalucha Selah. Happy are those who dwell in your house; they forever praise you, Selah. Ashrei Adam Oz Lo Vach Misilot Bilvavam. Happy is the man, or the human being, or the person who finds refuge in you. His mind is on the highways, the open highways. So what beautiful imagery about making a home and making a nest, and that sense of finding a home on this earth and finding a nest on this earth, and with God hovering close by, is such a beautiful image of comfort and home and embodiment. And I wish us all that sense, this Elul, as we kind of find our way in Tshuva back to our home on Rosh Hashanah. The whole planet is reborn.
Amen.
Amen.